What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to another episode of the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be having an interesting topic on a very much a hot button issue. And who better to discuss this with than McCourt, who is an anti-abortion activist from the UK. She is also a director of the new organization, which is called Abortion Resistance. So welcome to the show, Eden. How you doing?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm doing really well, thanks. I've got a bit of a flu because I was just traveling back from Croatia, so I think I caught something on the plane. But other than that, doing absolutely fabulously. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I've done a brief intro right there, Eden, but I know your organization is new and my listeners may not be familiar with what it is that you're doing. So tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Abortion Resistance was launched only 4 months ago. So it is literally a baby organisation. And it's the youngest anti-abortion organisation in the UK. It was kind of birthed as a need to engage with young pro-life and pro-abortion people around the UK and around the world on the topic of abortion. In the UK, there are lots and lots of different organisations that focus on different sectors, crisis pregnancy, post-abortion, campaigning, lobbying, parliament and stuff like that. But there's nothing really that's kind of breaking down the barriers of conversation between young people and also offering kind of a more digital support aspect of things for women in crisis pregnancies and just a way for people to connect. So it's kind of been born from a need to engage with young people on social media and in real life, and especially in London, where everyone is pretty much pro-abortion and you get a lot of resistance if you are pro-life as a young person.
Sure thing. So it's interesting that you are a young woman who is pro-life because, as you said, that puts you in the minority. I don't think as much of a minority as people actually think. I think there's propaganda making it seem like your type are essentially non-existent, which is not true at all. But what is it that led you to the point of even wanting to do this? How did you even get involved in this?
Oh gosh, that is a long story. So it started when I was about 3 years old. My parents found out they were expecting a child with severe disabilities, and they were heavily pressured by the medical professionals to have an abortion. So the syndrome that my sister had was called Patau syndrome. It's quite rare, and the lifespan of the child that's born with Patau syndrome, which again is also rare, is a few weeks maximum. And so the medical professionals really said, there's no point in having this child. It'd be really selfish. The best option here is abortion. Now, my dad is he's Afro-Caribbean. And so in that culture, they really do value the human person, even in the womb. And so abortion really wasn't an option for my parents. And my mum came from kind of like she's from New Zealand, but her parents are like Irish and kind of the Catholic background, and that just wasn't on the cards. And they found it really difficult to actually find healthcare providers who were supportive of their decision to choose life. And so they started getting involved with a pro-life organisation who put them in touch with a few pro-life doctors and medical professionals in London. And so from kind of a young age, I'd been in contact with this pro-life organisation. And then it wasn't until I got to my teen years when I started having conversations with my peers about it, and it started coming up on television and all that kind of thing, where I got into a discussion one day. I must have been about 13 or 14. And one of the girls was arguing it from a case of disability, trying to justify abortion in the case where the child has a disability. And it kind of, my sister, she had died at that point. She lived past the odds. She lived till she was almost 4. Mm-hmm. And she was the happiest child I'd ever met. She just brought so much joy and inspiration to my life and so many other people's lives. And so when I heard her talking about it and trying to justify abortion from that aspect, I kind of thought, whoa, hang on a second. You're basically saying people like my sister don't deserve to have a chance at life. Mm-hmm. And she was like, yeah, and your parents were selfish for bringing her into the world. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's crazy. I was like, so you're saying she was better off dead than ever have existing and me never have knowing her? And she said yes. And so that's when I was like, this doesn't seem right to me. So I kind of looked into the laws, found out that in the UK, you can have an abortion up to 24 weeks for any reason and up to birth in the case of disability. And that really shocked me. I thought that was just absolutely abhorrent. And I started looking into the procedures, how it's done. And that's kind of what gave me the boost to get involved. So I started volunteering at different pro-life organisations, crisis pregnancy centres, and then going to stuff like the March for Life in London. It was actually done in Birmingham at the time. And then it kind of just went from there, I realized that, with the unborn being systematically targeted and killed in the womb, there is no issue to me that is more important in this day and age because it's legal. And so really trying to combat that, because it's just so abhorrent and it's destroying our society and destroying lives and women's lives, because they're being sold this lie that it's somehow empowering. I just thought I wouldn't be doing my duty if I didn't stand up and actually do something actively about it. So when I was 18, I started doing street outreach and talking to people actually on the streets about the issue, and found out that there are more people than we think that are in the middle, and you just need to have a conversation with them to get them to understand your perspective and why human life is important in the womb. And you just kind of automatically think everyone is pro-abortion because that's what the media tell you to think, and it's not the case. There is
Not
such
true
a
at all.
huge it's not true at all. There's a mountain of people in the middle who maybe for some circumstances, but when you actually have a conversation and reason with them, they get it. And so from street outreach, I started working with an organisation in Scotland when I was 20. I did that for 3 years, and then I left there this year and started a new organisation, Abortion Resistance, with some friends of mine, and that's kind of primarily based in London at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of this history of how I.
Well, it's important because it's important to know what drives and motivates people, because oftentimes it is some type of personal experience or circumstance. I think when it comes to this issue in particular, and I'm sure as an activist, you know this, there are a lot of things that make it a minefield. And one of them is the fact that it's not a comfortable conversation, regardless of someone's position or lack of. It's not a dinner party conversation. It's not a pleasant thing to discuss, right? As someone who is pro-life myself, every time I have the conversation, even if it's with another person who is pro-life, let alone someone who is not, it's not pleasant. It's just gross. It's dark. It's human life and death. However people want to frame it or sugarcoat it or whatever their position is, if you're speaking about the issue honestly, and I give some respect to that person you were talking to, because even though I totally disagree with her position, at least she was honest, and that's actually quite hard to find, because a lot of people on the opposite side of the argument rely completely on euphemisms and dancing around the issue and never really talking about it head on or saying their position, because when they say it, especially that argument, I mean, that's a straight up eugenics argument.
Yeah.
Right. No sugarcoating. Yeah. That is an argument for eugenics. And if you go around and ask people if they support eugenics, I mean, they're like, oh, of course not. Right. That's abhorrent. That's a terrible idea. But I mean, I tweeted about this the other week. I said a surprising number of people in the West, when it comes down to it, support eugenics. And they wouldn't say that, but it's true. If you're saying that, if somebody is, I mean, the laws in the UK are eugenic. Right. If you're saying that, okay, this is the limit. I mean, 24 weeks is absurd, I think, to begin with. But if you're saying there's no limit if someone has a disability, and that could include something as mild as a cleft lip, a cleft palate, right? Down syndrome, right? Things there are countries, I'm sure, in the world, in Europe, where Down syndrome essentially doesn't exist anymore. Why is there nobody with Down syndrome? It's like, oh, because you killed them all before they were born. So when you really start talking about it and you go into it, you see it's actually it's dark. It's really dark, and we're living in this time where we're supposed to be all advanced and progressive and liberal and kind and tolerant and so on and so forth, and there's millions and millions of people, billions, over the course of many years, who don't have any human rights. Right? People don't even want to recognize the humanity of this subset of the population. And that, to me, I don't know if you feel the same way, but to me, that's dark. That's like, whoa. For all the gains we've made and all the progress and all the anti-discrimination and equality and expansion of rights. I mean, even the way people treat animals. I mean, someone kicks a cat, or someone is mean to a dog, and people come, or someone shoots a lion. Right? I mean, the way. The boy, you're going to get the mob on you, but then you'll also get the mob on you if you say, hey, I don't think we should kill unborn babies. And are you surprised by how controversial that position is
It just
sometimes.
never fails to amaze me. I genuinely, and there are people out there who know that it is a human from fertilization and will still defend the pro-abortion position, and that never fails to literally boggle my mind. I just don't understand it. I don't know how somebody could come to have that mentality, who, and even like you said, yeah, okay, I respect this girl, she actually said like she was for an extreme eugenics position, but how can you have that mentality? Where does that come from?
I mean,
It's like,
I generally don't think we are as advanced as we think we are. I think that all throughout human society, every time, everywhere in history, I'm not aware of anywhere in the world really, or any place that is like what I would describe as truly consistently pro-life across the board. It
hmm,
doesn't exist, and it's never really
hmm,
existed. I mean, you go back in history, of course there were genocides and people discriminating against each other. This group of people aren't human, this group of people is not human, so on and so forth. Slavery, brutality, all I mean, thousands of years, going back thousands
hmm,
and thousands of years. And it took a really long time for people to work out, oh, this slavery thing's a bad idea. I mean, slavery
hmm.
went on for thousands of years. And it's kind of mind-blowing to think that, I mean, imagine being someone who was pro, who wanted to abolish slavery, right? At the time
Yeah.
where it was just like, well, that's just the norm, and these
Mm,
people are not human beings, so we can do this and we can do that. And you're kind of there in the minority thinking, this is clearly wrong. Like, this is clearly morally and ethically an issue. But when you're in that minority and the popular position is just, I'm sure there were plenty of people who didn't really like it and were like, I don't really like this. I wouldn't
mm.
I wouldn't do it myself, but that's someone else's choice. Um, it's odd. So I don't think we're kind of done with that societal evolution yet. And
Yeah.
I think in this particular scenario, especially because it's framed as a women's rights issue, that is one of the most powerful tools in the thing. Because
Oh,
then
yeah.
if you are pro-life or anti-abortion, then especially as a man, I mean, I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
get plenty of heat too. But it then becomes, oh, you're anti-women's rights,
You're
you're
against
anti-women,
women.
you want to control people, you want to force people to do this and force people to do that. You're anti-choice, you're pro-birth, I mean, I don't mind being called pro-birth. I mean, I am pro-birth. I think if a woman gets pregnant,
Mm.
she should give birth. I don't think she should be forced into pregnancy, obviously.
Yeah.
But and then it's also a strange conversation because people act as if they don't know where babies come from, right?
I know.
That's another weird part. It's like it's this mystical thing, and
That just
just
happens
boom, just
randomly, and
and
it's
I'm
like,
like,
oh,
can we? By the time we're having this conversation, something upstream has already happened, and I think we live in this age where I've said before, people want all of the rights and none of the responsibilities. You want the right to do
mhm.
absolutely everything and for there never to be a consequence. You want to
Yeah.
outsource accountability, outsource responsibility, and it's me, 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 me. I want this, me, like on, it's all that, but there's not much of a conversation about, okay, well, what are the responsibilities
Yeah.
that come with this, right? You have a right. I mean, there's no laws around whether who somebody can have sex with or how they should have sex, or like you have a right to, I have a right to go and knock up dozens and dozens of different women if there's no laws stopping me from doing that.
Yeah.
But I have a responsibility as a man, as an adult, to take responsibility for my actions
Your
and to be
actions.
wise with my decision making. If I go
Yeah.
and do that and then I'm playing the victim because I've got to pay child support to 10 different people, I don't think I'm going to gain much sympathy.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And you know what the scary thing is as well? It's like, again, yeah, taking responsibility for the consequences of your actions, but it's absolutely petrifying to see how many young people refuse to take responsibility for anything. And
mhm,
it's interesting as well because, even with movements, if somebody in a movement treats, so for example, all the crisis pregnancy centers that were bombed and destroyed in America after Roe v. Wade was overturned, there was no even responsibility from the pro-choice movement over there condemning the actions of the
no.
people within their movement. And it's like really scary, because they're doing terrible things, and no one's, no one's taking responsibility and apologizing for it or doing anything about
It's
it.
because
And again,
it's because a lot of people quietly agree with it.
yeah,
And
which
those
is
who
also
don't,
scary.
yeah, I mean, this isn't really in our lifetimes, but I mean, in the US in particular, I mean, this happened the other way around I want to say in like the 80s and in the 90s. There were abortion clinics getting bombed. There were abortionists who got assassinated.
Mm,
That was a very real thing. There were
yeah,
pro-life advocates, anti-abortion activists who would do that. And it's, again, this is why the thing is such a weird and odd conversation, because you can also understand that position. And I'm not saying this to justify it at all, to be very clear
mhm,
on that. That is not the way that activists should behave. And I do not condone violence. But if someone is going in there and taking lives every single day, taking innocent lives, it's not extremely difficult to understand where someone is coming from, where, oh, okay, well, I'm now justified to take this person's
yeah,
life if
yeah,
that is what they're doing. So you can understand it. And then on the flip side, again, with the way the narrative is painted, it's like, oh my gosh, these people are, I mean, I don't know why you specifically target a crisis pregnancy center. That's kind of strange. But for people on the far end of the other issue, it's like, oh my gosh, these people are taking women's rights and trying to force them to do
mm,
this, and this is the slippery slope into the Handmaid's Tale, and
yeah,
they're going to do this, and right. I mean, but that's not my position. But if you just listen to people and you see what they're
yeah,
saying and you listen to what that's their
yeah,
position,
thought
right? You
process,
know,
yeah,
these extreme anti-choice activists, and it's all, I don't know. It's so messy. It's very, very messy. But in terms of your own position, what is your, how would you sort of summarize what your personal position is? If someone asks you, okay, you call yourself pro-life, you call yourself anti-abortion,
yeah,
what's your position? What are the, people like to go into the nuances of exceptions
yeah,
and this and that.
yeah.
What is your position, to be clear on that?
So I am completely and utterly against abortion in all circumstances. With regards to when a woman's life is in danger, for example, like an ectopic pregnancy, intention does come into it. And so if the embryo will die and the mother will die if it's not removed, it's not technically an abortion because the procedure isn't done for the sole intention of targeting and killing the unborn, but to save the life of the mother
Mm,
in a very physically life-threatening manner where, if both are going to die, you have to save one.
yes.
And so, other than that, in the extreme cases, which everyone always likes to bring up, like rape and incest, I would be against abortion in those circumstances. Um, and eventually, I'd like abortion to become illegal. But
Hmm.
before that happens, I think we need to have a societal shift in the way that we look at abortion and actually
Yes.
how it does affect women. So, you kind of hear the pro-abortion crowd saying, well, if abortion becomes illegal, women are going to do it anyway. And that is true unless we're able to change the culture and provide better support systems for women in crisis pregnancies and also parents in general. So that is a massive mission.
It's also not a great argument to say that something should be legalized simply because some people are going to
Yeah.
do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's really not a great. I mean, I don't think many of the arguments are great,
Yeah. But
are
that
great
was
in
like,
favor. But I
yeah.
mean, no one with any other issue, like with any other, especially a violent crime issue, I was going, oh
Yeah.
well, some men are going to rape women anyway,
So we
so
should just
it's like
legalize it. So
no
you do
one
it
in their
safely.
no one in their right mind would consider such a thing. And also, there's no other situation where people will use situations that make up less than 1% of the situations in order to argue in favor of 100%. We
Yeah.
understand there are times where homicide is justified. All right. If
Yeah.
someone comes at me, if I have a gun and someone comes at me and draws a gun on me and I shoot them before they shoot me, that's a justified homicide.
Yeah.
I'm probably
Self-defense.
not even going to go to trial, right? Justified homicide can happen in situations of war where war has been declared and you're defending your land against an invader or something, and you kill someone. That is a justified homicide, but that doesn't mean homicide in general is okay, right?
Exactly.
Just because you can find rare and specific cases where you might be able to say, okay, from at least a moral or an ethical perspective, that or is justifiable, it still wouldn't mean, okay, so all of it is. And again,
Yeah.
people only use that approach on this particular issue. As soon as people jump straight there, it's just like, okay, you're not really being
Genuine.
honest here. No.
And you don't actually really care. It's kind of like, it's the first thing the pro-choice movement will always bring up is rape and incest. It's the first thing they go to, and it makes up less than 1% of all abortions.
Yes.
And I mean, that is still it's terrible. But the fact that they would trivialize that kind of act just to push their agenda, I just think it's so dodgy. It's so wrong.
Do you think that those are reasonable legal exceptions?
No,
No?
because
Okay.
no, I don't. I just, again, if we kind of go through the logic of that, a human is a human from fertilization. I don't think I can justify, like, you can justify killing that human because of something that they didn't commit or for circumstances out of their control with regarding to their conception. And again, it really is a hard one, especially if it's like a minor or something like that. And it's very, it's really,
because I asked that because that's something that even as someone who considers myself pro-life, that's one where I think ethically and morally, the circumstances of conception make no difference. A human being is a human being. I'm not going to suddenly say, oh, it's not a human being because it's not intellectually consistent nor biologically consistent. I'm not sure myself where I stand on the legality of those 0.4% cases or something, because also that's a situation where this is not someone, again, coming back to that responsibility piece, this is not someone kind of being responsible for their own actions, if that's something that was forced. However, I do think that it's important overall, coming back to a point you were making earlier, is I'd like to see our societies just move generally in a more pro-life direction. And I think that for that to happen, you have to win the moral and ethical conversation first. I think that jumping straight into legislation, I don't know. I think you have to change. You have to change. Politics is downstream of culture. You have to get people to at least concede that this is not a good thing. And this is also how the conversation has changed, because that used to generally be understood and accepted decades ago. But now the so-called pro-choice movement has in many ways become, their actual position has changed.
Yeah.
Gone from, safe, legal, and rare, which is a bit of an oxymoron in itself, but it's gone from that to which has the implicit understanding that, okay, this is not a good thing. This is not something we want tons of women doing, or we don't want women going out there and having 10 abortions or something like that. But it was kind of this begrudgingly pro-choice position. And now a lot of people still do hold that, but the larger voices in the space now are just like, look, it's just, my body, my choice, no uterus, no restrictions, no time limits, no nothing. And if you are opposed to that in any way, shape, or form, then you are a terrible person who hates women, and so on and so forth. So as someone who spends a lot of time, I mean, you're dedicating your time and your work and your energy to doing this, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you face, or what are some of the things that you have found most surprising in your activism thus far?
That's a really tough question. What has been the biggest hurdle? You know what? The youth, the young people, especially on social media. I reach a lot of people with my social media platform, TikTok especially, because it's just a platform designed for that, just to get a lot of views and stuff. And it's kind of the most disheartening thing, because again, when you go out and have real life conversations with these people, it's, you realize that a lot of them are more open to the culture of life than you would expect. But when you go on platforms like TikTok and even Twitter, people are so vicious, and they would say things to you that they would never dream of saying in a normal conversation face to face. And so that's probably been the biggest hurdle, is actually trying to kind of cut through all the crap that's posted, and actually have proper discussions, because it is possible to change someone's mind over social media. I mean, I've done it lots of times before, but actually finding the time to wade through it all and actually pick up people who are genuinely interested, and not listen to kind of the really terrible things that you get sent. But the most surprising thing, I think, has been just yet again, when you actually speak to people about it, how many people are willing to listen. Again, the media paints it out to be a very black and white, polarized, which in online I think it is. But when you get to maybe the dinner table, maybe not, maybe street outreach, and you're actually speaking to people, you know, they're more open to listening, and they're not as like dismissive, and it's not as kind of black and white as like you hate women. You can kind of get through to them the kind of compassionate side and help them see where you're coming from, rather than it just being a screaming match or a comment war or something, you know.
How often do you find that people even know the basic facts?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's really not very well online, not very often, and it's certainly in person. They won't even know the laws. People just don't know. They just kind of go along believing it, but they don't actually know. When I tell people that you can have abortion up to birth for disability in the UK, they are horrified. The majority of them are absolutely shocked because they don't know that, because it's not discussed well enough. And again, they wouldn't go into it just and look into it off their own backs. So I don't think a lot of people know the facts. But then again, you get the people who do know that human, and to be fair, actually, just going back, the amount of people who refuse to acknowledge that human life does begin in the womb is also quite scary. I have had a really hard time comprehending the amount of people who will blatantly deny it. And I don't know if it's trauma linked to some kind of abortion related experience, because
I think that's a big problem too.
Yeah, and they just block it. But the refusal to acknowledge the facts that you can literally see on any health website or medical textbook, that is shocking to me.
Well, I think that people don't want to confront or accept that, not because they actually don't believe it, but because if it's accepted, then that has real moral implications
Yeah.
for their position and perhaps for what they are advocating for. So with me myself, I mean, up until my late 20s, I never thought about the issue, honestly. Very, very little. Like off on the surface, I never liked the idea. I was always like, yeah, like it's gross. Like I always thought it was killing a baby, of course, because it just is. But I never really had like a reason or anything to really, I don't know, get in. I didn't really have a position, which is, I think, a lot of people's positions. I think a lot of people are almost, I guess you could say, pro-choice by default.
Yeah.
Right? It's the
Yeah.
law. It's the law of the land. I assume that the laws are generally correct and make sense, and other people have thought about this way more than I have. So you tend to just, whatever country you're in, most people just accept, okay, like the law is just the law and this is how it is, and it probably makes sense, because in most cases it does. Normally it's like, okay, like, okay, I get, it makes sense. So I'm not gonna go out and question this. And then when some of these conversations just started popping up more, I think, for example, when certain bills started being passed in the USA and whatever, and it just started becoming a much bigger conversation, it got to a point where I was like, you know what, let me really do my research. Right. Let me really look into this. Let me look into the human. I mean, I remember learning in school a little bit about fetal development and gestation and what life looks like at different stages. But let me really look into this. Let me look into, okay, how is an abortion performed, right? At the different stages. Okay, at the first 12 weeks, this is what it looks like. And then, second trimester, this is what it looks like. If it goes to third trimester, these are the procedures. And I actually watched a couple videos, like real videos.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think many people have like actually watched a video of a so-called dilation and evacuation.
Yeah.
I was like, holy, like, it messed me up. Like it messed me up. And obviously seeing photos of the result, I mean, I'd seen those before, and I was just like, I became pro-life like pretty fast. And then listening to the best arguments on both sides of the debate, and just finding the pro-life one so much more compelling and consistent and intellectually honest and morally sound, because To accept abortion, you either have to deny the humanity,
Yep.
which is biologically unsound, or you have to accept that in some scenarios it's okay to intentionally directly terminate an innocent human life.
Yep.
You have to accept either. You have to
Liberty.
accept one or both of those.
Yep.
And given my own moral framework and my own intellectual honesty, I'm like, no, I'm not cool. I'm not cool with either of those. I can't do it's not a baby. It's a parasite. It's a clump like that. That's it. Completely intellectually dishonest. Or you have to go, okay, yeah, it is a baby. It is a human being, but I think you should be able to kill that human being anyway.
Yeah.
If it inconveniences you, or you can't afford it, or they might be, and I'm like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that. Some people hear that and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. And I'm just like, no, that doesn't sit with my
Right.
ethics and my morals and what I know to be correct. I think that there are many from a pragmatic or a convenience perspective, I think there are many solid arguments in favor of abortion, but I don't think
Yeah.
that convenience should trump morality and ethics. I think that if you accept that, then yeah, you're just going into very dark territory. Then you can start
Yeah.
justifying a lot of really dark things and saying,
Yeah.
oh, well, it would be more convenient or more pragmatic or cheaper to do this or that. You can argue to bump off all sorts of people.
Yeah. And even with slavery, I mean, an issue of convenience. Again, you could have argued it from that point of view.
Yeah, economics, convenience, or yeah, so it's that, or again, you go to the dehumanization argument, which is what they used. I mean, the USA, they say, oh, well, these are not human beings, right? They're in the same category as livestock, as cattle or chicken, and that's how they got around it, despite the fact that, and what's even darker with that is, I mean, if you think of it at that time, I mean, a country like the USA, and even in the Great Britain, I mean, those were more Christian countries than they are now.
Yeah.
So it's even weirder to think, man, like people who on many other things, they were so like on point and moral and righteous, but like there's just this huge gape, like giant blot in terms of what they're doing and how they're justifying it. And I do feel like we are there again as a society with this particular issue, where there's this giant blot, and it's kind of hidden and it's kind of invisible. And I think that's also how people get around it, because it's not visible, right? It's not like
exactly.
you can just walk around. I mean, you can go to San Francisco, you can go to the most liberal place where you're just walking around, oh, cool, like you're not like seeing this happening. It's just like, oh, okay. But there's this dark underbelly in this industry, and it really is an industry. And this is happening, and you can look at the numbers, and you can look at the figures, and no one talks about it, and it's all like underground, and no one sees it, no one sees the result of it. It's just like, oh, just put that in the waste disposal, and out of sight, out of mind. And I think that, I don't know, I think even if women had like transparent bellies or something, and you could like see with a pregnant woman, you could literally like see the child there, I think even that would make such a big difference in the empathy and compassion that people feel, because it's just like, oh, out of sight, out of mind. They don't think about it.
And it's interesting as well, because during the whole COVID stuff, in the UK, they introduced pills by post, which is basically taking medical abortion pills at home. And so there were lots of women who were being coerced into having abortions, who were family members were ringing up and getting the abortion pills delivered to their homes, who had no face-to-face contact with any kind of medical professional, abortionist, abortion providers, whatever, and then had to go through all of that in their own homes. They had to literally take the pills and then deliver their dead children down their toilets, by themselves. And that's now become an implemented thing in the UK. They put it through a few months ago. But I kind of think maybe because of it, more and more women are going to start waking up to the reality of what abortion is and what it does. And maybe things might get better, and people who have had abortions, post-abortive women, will actually come forward and be like, well, I had this and I saw this and I experienced this, and this is not, an empowering thing. This is not a pro-women thing. But that's really sad.
How do you think it's how do you think it's man, this sort of framing of the issue as being something that's empowering to women. As a woman yourself, how does that, number one, how does that kind of make you feel? And number two, how do you think that you avoided the psyop? I think it's a psyop, but how did you avoid that? Because I do think that for decades there have been many, many lies pushed upon society, pushed on men, pushed on women. Sometimes it's the same message, sometimes it's a different message, particularly for one sex. And I do think that this one has been one of the most successful brainwashing schemes of the past couple
Yeah.
decades, for it to be framed as this is not, this is a moral good, this is pro-social, this is empowering, this is, you go girl, your body, your choice, don't let no man tell you what. Like the way it's been sold is mind-blowing to me. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, because I think it's the opposite. I literally think it's the opposite.
Yeah, it is it's so insidious the way that they've managed to dupe millions of females around the world into thinking that this is something that's beneficial for them and other women. And it's so insulting as well, because if you come at it from kind of like a feminist perspective, where a lot of pro-choice advocates would classify themselves as feminists, they are literally trying to reject the thing that is inherent to females to fit into a kind of male dominated world where they have to have abortion in order to be equal to men, in order to be successful or have careers or fulfill their dreams as women. They have to deny the very thing that's inherent to specific, to the female body. And so I just, again, the way that they've sold it and pushed it as like, oh, to be equal in society, you have to adapt a male normative body, and to fit in, that's how you have to do it. You have to deny motherhood and actually, even go against it completely. Like it's like anti-motherhood, anti-child. It's so sick. It's so twisted. It's so screwed up. So again, and that's kind of an angle that I come at it from is, if you're speaking to someone who's pro-choice, they'll identify themselves as a feminist. And you can kind of come at it from the angle of, well, how can you accept a feminism that's telling you that you need to reject your fertility in order to fit into society, in order to even exist or to have a career? It's just, it's shocking. Absolutely shocking.
How do you think you avoided that?
I think it's my sister, Josephine, again, giving me the perspective on life that she did. My parents, and also it's been interesting. Have you heard of Darren Brown?
Yes.
Okay, so I love Darren Brown and I watch a lot of his stuff. And, he always talks about the majority of the human race are very susceptible to outer influences and can pretty much be kind of programmed to do anything, which we've kind of seen over the past few years. Just by authority figures. And I think there are some people who don't have the strength to kind of resist the flow and actually think for themselves. The majority of people just want to go with the flow. They don't want to stand out. They want to fit in, they want to be part of a tribe, part of a crew. And so they go with what the majority is rather than thinking for themselves. And I just think some people are naturally a bit more susceptible to outer influence and some people aren't. And I think probably it comes into it that I don't think I am. I think I am more thinking for myself, which is like you. So
yeah. So how do you think that we move forward on this issue? So you've started your organization, Abortion Resistance, but what do you think are some effective ways of having these discussions, which can be difficult, and actually getting people to see, removing this veil and getting people to at least see what is really going on? Because I find myself, like, I don't consider myself an activist at all, but I find it, maybe it shouldn't be shocking, because I myself, even in my mid-20s, didn't really know all that much about what was really going on, because I'd never looked into it nor felt the inclination to do so in any sort of detail. It was just like, it's icky, it's gross. I don't want to look into that so much. So I'm not totally like, I'm shocked by some people's complete lack of any type of biological sense, but But I guess I can also empathize with people not knowing some of the facts, because there was a time when I myself didn't.
Yeah.
So what do you think is an effective approach?
Um, there are so many. I think one of the most effective approaches is actually putting like the ground, like doing the groundwork and actually being there to support women. You know, there have been young girls who've come to me and people in organizations that run crisis pregnancy centers who come, they'll offer them every single avenue of support. And because it's legal, that woman will still go away and have her abortion. There's nothing you can do. You can't hold them down to, tie them down to a bedpost and stop them. But then also being there for them afterwards to help them and let them know that they're still loved, and they still, you know, matter, and you can kind of support them after that. I think it's really important to come at it from a point of view where we're not against women. We're here for women during and after, and even if, you know, if they choose life, which hopefully, you know, that's obviously what you always want, you'll be there to help them and support them afterwards in any capacity that you can. And they'll tell people, and they'll, you know, you'll kind of witness in that way. They'll tell other people about how you behaved and what you've done. And there's never been a better kind of ambassador for the pro-life movement than post-abortive women who have been helped by the pro-life movement, and women who've had their children and also been supported, because people will listen to them more than if we just say human life begins at fertilization, it's wrong to take an innocent human life. So kind of, again, it's such an emotional topic that kind of addressing it in an emotional way in a compassionate way is good. But then saying that, sometimes there is a time to be a bit sassy and a bit fiery, and do rallies and, you know, make your voices heard and be loud. And on social media, I think that's a great way of doing things, because when you're loud, when you're outrageous, when you're kind of bold and feisty, people like content like that. They like content they can mull over and, oh gosh, can you imagine? Can you believe she's just said that? And then you get the engagement, and then you get more people seeing your content, and then you get the people that want to come to you for genuine conversations where you can actually change minds. So there are different methods of activism and stuff like that. But one thing that abortion resistance is really trying to do, as well as helping women with our kind of baby basket scheme, is that we are doing regular rallies outside Parliament and all around different places in London, which is kind of, again, outreach. We're speaking to the public, and the way that we're kind of doing it is we're kind of not addressing abortion as a whole, but specific aspects of it. So, for example, the rally we had a few weeks back was on coerced abortion. Nobody, pro-life or pro-choice, is going to agree with coerced abortion. So finding that common ground and being like, whoa, you don't agree with coerced abortion, neither do we. Let's see how we can kind of maybe work on this and work for a better, you know, less coercion for women, and kind of picking at it like that, like baby steps kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really wise, because it's an issue that can be so hard to find common ground on, especially it's easier to find common ground with people who are, let's say, begrudgingly pro-abortion rights, rather than the ones who are just like hardline.
Yeah,
because
totally.
people who are hardline, you know, in favor of abortion versus people who are hardline against it, it's so hard to thread that needle, because it's just like, you know, if this person is saying life begins at conception, it's wrong to take an innocent human life, you know, completely unnecessarily. And the other person is saying, nope, there should be no restrictions whatsoever, any point, any time, any reason, no questions asked. Like, I've had these conversations before. And you know, those are the ones where I'm just like, man, well, I hope your heart changes.
Softens,
because I don't even know
what to say. What can I say?
Yeah.
But then the thing is, with those types of people, I genuinely think they must have had like a direct abortion experience. Certainly from what I've seen from the people that I know and how long I've been doing this, people who are uber pro-abortion, who will deny the humanity or, you know, everything like that, they have usually been a victim of the abortion industry. Or for guys who I find are, you know, the most loud about this to me, they've pressured someone into having it. You know, they've said, if you don't get an abortion, I'm going to leave, or something like that. And the men who've avoided responsibility by getting their partners pregnant and then telling them to have an abortion, they're the ones who are really, really, really staunchly abortion. So I think they've had a personal experience, and that's why it's so difficult to get through to them.
And that's a part that is rarely discussed.
Yeah.
I mean, women, I don't know in the UK, I know in the USA, women are more likely to be pro-life than men are. And if you think about that for a couple seconds, it shouldn't really shock you. It shouldn't really shock you. So, men are not going to say this out loud, but coming back to this point of the denial of responsibility and accountability, there are plenty of guys out there who want to have an out for their actions, and they don't want to be on the hook, instead of being more responsible and accountable upstream so that you don't even encounter this scenario. They would like to be able to, use women like disposable tissues and, hide the evidence. And no one wants to put it forward that way. And I'm not saying that's every guy's position. But those people are out there. And so they'll champion themselves as, pro-woman and pro-women's rights, and pro this and pro that. But there is a, there is a clear and obvious incentive there for them to have that position, let alone the fact that it's the easy one to hold socially. It wins you the virtue points. You can be, hey, look, I'm a champion for women, whatever. I mean, being pro-life, being a pro-life man, there's not really much of an
there's no incentive.
No, there's not much of an incentive beyond the fact that, it's simply just, look, man, I think this is morally wrong.
I know.
This is morally wrong. Like, there's no, I have nothing to gain from this. There's no nefarious thing. And it's so funny when they try to do the whole, you want to control. It's like, well, if there was this nefarious goal to control women and to force them into do this and that, it's like, well, again, why would this be the only issue that people feel that passionately about? Like, if someone was saying that and then they were also advocating for like all of this, removing the right to vote and forcing this and then okay, maybe that person, I've never encountered someone like this. Then there's a fair argument, okay, this person actually wants to control women. But it's just like, no, like, you can do what you want. You can tattoo your freaking face if you want. You can do this. You can do like plenty of things that I might even think are completely silly or harmful. It's just like, just don't kill anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing. I don't understand how, again, the kind of pro-choice movement don't realize that it is actually a really misogynistic thing. And like, I work for a post-abortion helpline. I do volunteer stuff with them. And for them, the majority, over 75% of callers have been coerced into abortions.
Really?
It happens so much more often than people think. The pro-choice movement paint it out like this isn't an easy decision for women. So, when a woman has abortion, she's really thought about it and she's decided that's exactly what she wants to do. So, trust women. But in the majority of cases, if you actually listen to the reasons why people get abortions, or if you even talk to post-abortive women, a lot of them will say, oh, I was studying and I didn't have anyone to help me. Oh, my partner said he would leave me. Oh, my career would have fallen down the drain because nobody would
even fathers in some cases.
Exactly. It's just, there are some, if it's not someone, a family member or a partner coercing, it's pressure from society where, again, like being a mother and trying to, be successful in a career is just, you just can't do it, which is so wrong to tell women because
it's just false.
You can do it.
It's it's so disempowering. It's such an annoying it can be such an annoying conversation because people come at it from such different, and I can get the different perspectives and angles, and I do my best to empathize with positions even if they're completely the opposite of my own, and I can see where they come from. But I do feel like with this issue, and I don't like to just call people I don't like to be that guy who just assumes that, oh, everyone who has a different opinion to me is brainwashed or the victim of a psyop or something. But in this case, like, knowing the propaganda around this and how it's run for decades and some of the narratives and messaging and the phrasing and the slow, I'm like, this is really deceptive. Like, there are a lot of people, there are millions and millions of people, maybe billions, who have been deceived on this issue. And another thing that makes it clear is when the you can always tell when someone's argument or position is not very strong based off to me there's three big ones. Number one is complete unwillingness to discuss it. Number two is relying completely on euphemisms, right? Never wanting to talk clearly and directly, so everything just becomes a euphemism. Choice, her body, reproductive justice, health care, like just never wanting to just say exactly what it, I support a women's right to choose.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Choose what?
Like so do I. Just I don't support abortion. I could support people's rights to choose many things, but not literally everything. So it's all euphemisms. Or then the other one is censorship, right? Wanting to censor or wanting to avoid looking at the actual issue, not wanting to see what you're actually advocating for, not wanting, and I see that happening a lot, because I think that I do genuinely believe that when you look at the facts, when you look at the biology, and you think about like, what I would consider pretty standard morals and ethics, the pro-life position to me is a lot stronger.
Yeah.
It's a lot stronger. It doesn't rely on euphemism. It doesn't rely on censoring. It doesn't rely on you actually want to have the conversations, because when you do, you can look at the facts and look, the facts are on my side. You're saying, okay, this is just a parasite or a clump of cells. Okay, let's actually look. Let's look at pictures. All right, let's look at pictures. Let's see what it is.
Like
you're saying, yeah, right. And no, they don't want to see it. They don't want to see the picture. You don't want to see the result of an abortion. Gosh, like they definitely people don't want to see that. I know people who have shifted strongly more in the pro-life directions just from seeing it, just being like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know, because you tell some people, like they, in a surgical abortion, they like rip the baby apart limb from limb and they crush the brain, and they're like, oh no, they come on, man, like they don't do that. You're like, they do. This is a standard procedure. I've had people I just show them and they're like, dude, I did not even know that was a thing, right? Maybe they just know about like the pill version and the very early stages, but they're like, dude, I didn't even know that. They're like, that's barbaric. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. They don't know. And again, it's the kind of censorship, like you said, of everything, and sugarcoating everything, and covering in all these nice words and free language, all these amazing, beautiful graphics of,
reproductive rights. That's a big one. I forgot. And that again is an oxymoron.
Yeah, I know, because it's already taken place.
No one, like, an attack on reproductive rights is something like China's old one-child policy.
Yeah, cutting off like different. Yeah.
Yes, that's an attack on reproductive rights is determining how many children you must have or can have, or like actually neutering people or something like that would be an attack on like everyone's got a right to reproduce. That's not the debate. That's not the question. You can have as many children as you want. You can choose not to have children if you don't want. All right, like that's not the issue. But if you've already reproduced, it's just don't.
You just don't kill your kids.
Do you know what's weird? Do you know what's even weirder about this whole thing? Is that we're talking about. It's not just that it's babies and kids. It's that it's your baby. This is your own offspring, right? So we recognize in society that as a parent, parents have a specific and unique and special responsibility to their own children. You have responsibility for your own children that you don't have for others, right? If I'm not responsible beyond, general laws and human decency, I'm not responsible for other people's children. I'm not responsible for feeding them or looking after. I can't get thrown in jail for neglecting someone else's child because it's not my child. If you have a son or a daughter who's a toddler and you go off partying and you leave them and they starve, you're on the hook because that's your child. So that's the whole thing that also makes it weirder to me, because it's like you realize this is your child. This isn't a random
child
baby. It's not even a random human being. This is your own child, your own flesh and blood, your own DNA, whether or not you can see it or you choose to recognize it as such. Like that's what we're dealing with. So that to me even makes it deeper, because it's like, why am I the one who is
Fighting for
concerned
your child.
about, yeah.
It shouldn't be like that. And it's kind of, humans have an instinctual, like it's ingrained in them to want to protect their children and protect their
Hmm.
offspring. And
Hmm.
it's such a betrayal of that, abortion industry, and what it's pushing is to go against the very thing that's rooted in mothers and fathers to want to do for their children. It's really sad.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm in the U.S. right now, and I mean it's everything that happens in the UK. I mean, in the US, it's just like 10x.
Yeah.
And this has obviously been a big conversation with the recent fall of Roe versus Wade. And then, but then, just before that, there was this school shooting in Texas.
Yeah.
And all of the energy, we need to do everything. I mean, think back to COVID, if it saves one life, we need to do everything to protect the children and save the children. We need to do this. And then a moment later, people are on the same people, oftentimes in many cases, are back on the street or back protesting for the right to kill their children.
Yeah.
And
It's
people don't like me saying that, but that's what it is. So your protest, I just don't think it's tenable for a society. I just don't think it's tenable to have this, like, okay, we really, really, like, nothing is more important than the preservation of human life and this and that. And in the same hospital, you can have a 23-week infant premature baby being delivered, and the nurses and the doctors are doing everything for that child to survive, everything. And then a child the same age, 23 weeks gestation, somewhere else, just kill him, suck him out, dump them, and all good. And that's
great.
like, that to me, I'm just like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Like, these are both, it can't be, oh yeah, this one is a baby, this one's a human life, this one, right? And then, oh, this one's just a clump of cells, doesn't matter, his life. It's like that. I'm making. And then another thing that's interesting is people act like it's merely a religious issue. And the people I see, and the people who invoke religion most, though, are not the pro-life people, right? It's framed as if, oh, like, we haven't made a freaking religious argument here yet.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's painted as if, oh, it's just these Christian extremists, they want to do this, and it's like, you're the one bringing in religion. Like, I haven't mentioned, I'm talking about biology, I'm talking about ethics, I'm talking about just pure rational thinking and logic. It's not logical to say that this 23-week-old baby is a baby and is a human life, and their life should be preserved and protected by the law, and this one is just a clump of cells or a parasite or a blastocyst or whatever, that's just to be discarded of if you don't want it. No one in the world asks a pregnant woman how her fetus is doing or how her clump of cell is doing. No woman has ever been to a fetus shower before.
Yeah, I know.
It's not a thing.
And that's another thing to me as well. So I'm currently almost 9 weeks pregnant, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks. And
how's your fetus doing?
Oh yeah, my parasite's great. Thanks. Fabulous. But this is the other thing. All the people that I know who are like really pro-abortion have been congratulating me.
Of course.
And I'm like, what?
Of course.
You don't even think he's a human. For what? What are you congratulating me for?
Yeah, I've heard women say that it's a human if the woman wants it, but not otherwise. And again, this is just going back to magic territory. Like, if anything's a religion, that's a religion, because that's
totally.
Like, I'm like, bro, like, that is not a biologically nor intellectually sound, or not in the slightest. That doesn't make sense.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's, again, basing someone's value and worth on how you personally feel about them is just not how we should be living. And again, and the other thing is with, society that is constantly focused and talking about equality and equal rights, but are still discriminating against humans in the womb. It's kind of like,
And the thing is, and we to round this conversation out, is, again, there are so many things that can be done upstream to avoid this issue, right? I mean, I've told people before, they're like, oh, you're anti-choice. I'm like, no, I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-abstinence, contraception, parenthood, adoption. There's only one so-called choice I have a real moral issue with. That's it. There's plenty of other ways. Billions and billions of people around the world managed to go through life without having so like it's not magic. We go to school, we know biology, we know how this process happens, men and women. I'm not just, again, I'm very careful not just to put this on women, like men, like you know how it works, you know how this happens, like so can we stop pretending
that we just think they magically appear?
Yeah, that's another really annoying part of it, because then again, people get bogged down in the weeds. But if you don't think it's a moral issue at all, then, whether someone has one abortion or 20 abortions, then, I mean, again, if someone's being intellectually consistent and they think that there's no moral weight to it, then it's like, well, it makes no difference. It's like clipping your toenails. But again, I don't think many people really hold that position, because they themselves do know deep down, this is not a good thing.
And again, the pro-life position is very logically consistent. The whole pro-life community agrees that human life begins at fertilization, whereas within the pro-choice movement, there's so many discrepancies. Some say it's a heartbeat, some say it's 24 weeks, some say up to birth. Some people think that you shouldn't abort disabled babies, some people think you should. There's so many just things that just don't add up. And it kind of, again, I think it goes to show the kind of
mental gymnastics.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's insane. And having to battle that every single day, sorry, can I just say, it's so annoying.
I know. I admire you, because I don't have the gumption for that. Like I can wade into this conversation like once every few weeks at most. Otherwise I'll go bananas.
Okay, but can I ask something? I know I'm on your podcast, but can I ask you something? Because I think this is really important. I'm big on this. So obviously you've got like a massive platform.
Yes.
Do you never have I don't know how to word this without sounding really cheeky, but do you know what? I've been cheeky this whole time, the whole time, emailing you on your podcast and all that kind of thing. So I might as well just carry on the trend. Do you not have more of an urge to fight for the right to life of unborn humans, or to use your platform to influence them a bit more? Because at the end of the day, it is a life and death issue, and you post so many amazing bang on things. Like my mum is absolutely obsessed with you, by the way. She is obsessed. She always talks about you and like how you've influenced people, and your content's always shared. Like on this issue, do you ever think that maybe you should post a bit more about it?
I've actually posted about it quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, you have.
Not to the degree of someone who's dedicated to this being their primary cause. But if I want to say something, I will say it. I also just find it's a again, given the size of my audience and platform, it's also a matter of effectiveness, because I've found, probably like yourself, if I talk to people in person, then in person I'm way more likely to shift people's minds and positions. There are many issues on Twitter where I'm just like, you know what, at this scale, the conversation becomes essentially impossible. So I can put my thought, I can put my view out there. And I even prefer doing a podcast like this. I've discussed this on multiple podcasts, and this is just a better platform for this conversation. Even if I've talked to someone I've talked to multiple people actually on the other side of this issue, and had a whole 1 hour and a half conversation about it. And to me, that's a much more effective, okay, you want to know my position? Look, here's my position. If you want to know where it comes from, and you want to, because I know exactly what I'm going to get, right? If I post on Twitter, I can literally predict the responses, and I'm going to have to go back over and over and over. Some of the responses are going to be completely stupid and inept, and I need to explain. And I'm now spending the next week having discussions with, and I'm like, I don't even know if I'm changing anyone's minds here. So for me, that's why I have the approach that I do, not just on this one issue, which I am passionate about, but on some others, because I'm just like, you know what, anytime this comes up, it's not that I'm even concerned about the criticism or whatever. Like, I don't, that's whatever. That's not the thing. It's just like, okay, I need to, what is going to be effective, what's going to be effective and actually change someone's mind. Like, I feel much better. Like, there's individuals I've spoken to, even individual friends, people I know, where I've had this conversation over multiple times, like, over the course of time, and I've actually brought them over much either completely pro-life or to like, you know what, maybe they're like 6 weeks, like max, right? Maybe before they were like all the way, and now they're like, okay, you know what, I've learned more about this issue, and after a heartbeat, you know, their position might be, okay, I think before a heartbeat still, you know, kind of gray, whatever. But after that point, they're like, no, obviously that's the termination of a human life. And I'm like, okay, that's not all the way, but that's a significant shift. And at least there's been that moral and ethical dilemma. You know, you've had to go through those weeds in your own head and so on. So I think on social media, even when it does come up, that still does happen for some people, which is why I'll bring it up. And once in a while, I think it's good to restate my position on certain issues, just so people are clear, because I'm always gaining followers, and a lot of people think, oh, okay, like, I know your position on this, so therefore I probably know your position on that one. And I'm like, no, like, I'm unapologetically pro-life, and here's why, whatever. But yeah, it's this cycle. It's this cycle. And there's also the time energy, the time factor, the energy. I'll tell you another one where, like, I don't really have, I've learned that for me personally, it's not really worth having the debate and conversation on Twitter is like, does God exist? Right? Does God exist? Or like, you know, why do I have my beliefs? I do. In the real world, I'll sit down with someone and, you know, we can go and we'll talk. But again, I've just learned, oh gosh, like, it won't mean I'll never talk about it, but I've had ones, and for the next week, it's just like people are commenting for weeks on end, and I then can't like talk about other things or whatever, because like all the energy and time, and I might want to promote my book or promote my music or say, hey, I've got an upcoming event coming up, and I'm not really trying to have like all the energy and time going towards that. So it's a tricky balance. But yeah, I mean, I'll on whatever issue, I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to discuss. It's just, and this is something I've learned as my audience has grown, because naturally my audience used to be a lot smaller, and when my audience was smaller, it was easier to go have these conversations and debates, and you know, you can go into it more. Now it's just like, oh boy, my tweets reach, you know, I could put out one tweet and it'll reach 3 million people. And now I'm trying to have a 1 versus 3 million conversation about what we've just talked about, and it's not it's not possible. And people get so like it just, like, I'll look literally a week later and people are still going at it in the comments.
Commenting. It's over now. It's been a couple weeks.
I'm like, was that productive? Did that shift anyone's mind? I don't know.
That's fair. No, that is absolutely fair.
But we have voices like yours, and I love and respect what you are doing, and you've got my support implicitly and explicitly. So Eden, before we jump off this, where can people find you online?
So we have a website, abortionresistance.org.uk, and we have every social media platform at Abortion Resist. So if people want to go and follow, that'd be absolutely fabulous. And thank you so much for having me on. And next time you're in London, I'm going to be watching out so I can come to one of your concerts.
Amazing.
So thank you.
Thanks, Eden. I appreciate you.